Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brandy Vincent, and I'm a staff correspondent at NextGov, a division of Government Executive Media Group. Thank you so much for joining us today for today's event, Testing Government's Connection, the Work from Home Digital Summit, which is going to explore how the at-home government workforce is solving challenges today and what the future might hold. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items for you. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button, which allows you to ask questions for the speakers. We'll be fielding those throughout this event, and we encourage you to submit questions along the way. If you experience any technical difficulties, just click on the help icon and a member of our support team will assist you. And now we'll start our session, the Manager's Toolbox. We've convened agency leaders that have put successful management practices in place to share what they've learned, their tips and tricks along the way for remote management, and how they've solved all the challenges that have come up. Joining us for the session, we have Sarah Eckert, Chief of Projects for 18F at General Services Administration, Danette Campbell, Director of the Telework Program Office at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and Nicole Barksdale-Perry, Executive Director of Human Resources Management and Services at the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So I want to start with the start of the disruption. In February, and I think we're getting a little bit of feedback right now. If our presenters can just go ahead and mute if they're not speaking, that'd be great. I'm going to go ahead and continue. I want to start with the start of the disruption. In February and early March, COVID-19 moved from outbreak to pandemic and disrupted nearly all aspects of life in the U.S. So senior leaders had to help their teams swiftly switch to new indefinite work from home reality. Across the government, agencies were at different levels of preparedness. So that's where we'll start. We'll go with GSA's 18F. Sarah, your team was really used to working in a remote environment before this, but you also saw an immediate demand in your services. So tell us a little bit about what that initially looked like.
Yeah, thank you, Brandy, for the question and for the invite to come here today. The growth and demand really for us was twofold. So we immediately saw a need across TTS, which is our parent organization that stands for Technology Transformation Services. So we initially saw help, whether that was, help to get a website, up and running, or the use of our products like Login. But we also saw a demand within our current engagements to share tips with our partners for working remotely. So as you mentioned, 18F has been, remote since we were established 6 years ago. So we were already, most exclusively working remotely on our engagements with our partners. So we had established those norms from the very beginning with how to work remotely successfully. So at the turn in March, I guess late, February, early March, we started to provide additional support to our partners, including, sharing tips for working remotely and blogs we had written regarding remote work. We also recently just posted a blog on how to research during these critical times, which includes researching in a remote environment. So here at 18F, when we're coaching our partners, we focus really on inclusivity, accessibility, trust, patience, staying present, making space for everyone, active communication, respecting time, and just being intently human. So we model these best practices by working alongside our partners in coaching, and that includes sharing best practices on how we work together in a remote environment.
That's great. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into those in just a bit. Let's switch over to Danette. At USPTO, you guys have the majority of its nearly 13,000 employee base already teleworking and telework ready. So what was in place and available that made the transition seamless? And what were some initial streams along the way?
Okay, so with that 11,000 plus employee base that we had teleworking, keep in mind that more than half of those were already working from home full time. So, of course, all of our teleworkers have agreements in place. They've all received IT and non-IT training. Our managers are trained in managing in a remote work environment. And let's face it, we've been doing this for a long time. So, of course, we were very well positioned to make the transition. Now, again, we do have, as you can imagine, some of our employees who are not working full time, working from home maybe 1 to 3 days a week. So for some of those individuals, there was a transition when they went to work from home full time. But with our managers being so aware and so in tune with all of their employees, not just teleworkers, of course, they've made a point of reaching out to these individuals, maintaining, excuse me, ongoing communication, conducting a lot of web-based meetings, doing a lot of video teleconferencing with folks, just staying in touch. We had about 1,600 individuals who were not teleworkers at the onset of our mandatory telework initiative. And so we had to ensure that we had a training in place for those people so that when they got home with their laptop, they knew exactly what they needed to do. And so we put together a very comprehensive IT training that they could print out before they actually left the USPTO campus. So they were prepared and positioned to set up all of their tools when they got home. I would have to say if there was a strain, it would be those newly onboarded employees who were, coming to the agency to receive orientation, and did they not only get the orientation materials, they got materials to go and work from home full time. So didn't really have an opportunity to experience that USPTO on-campus culture. But again, their managers are so attuned to keeping everyone connected and being inclusive. So I would say, again, if there was a strain, it may have been that pocket of individual. We don't hire with telework as a condition of employment up until now. Yeah. So this group of employees are certainly sort of a proof of concept, right?
That's great. I think we're getting a lot of proof of concepts during this time for sure. Thanks, Danette. And Nicole, at DHS, personnel work in roles that are public facing or focused on mission support. At the start of the pandemic, how was the transition across your workforce? And tell us a little bit about the resources that you released early on.
So thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to discuss DHS's mission focus and our efforts. So to your point, DHS has a large contingent of employees that are in public facing positions, or what we refer to as location dependent positions. And those, of course, are positions that do not have telework ready or are not telework ready because their work is not transportable. And so we really had to focus on both those positions as well as the mission support positions. So just tackling the mission support positions first, mission support positions within the department are already telework ready, and those individuals are already on telework agreements. Individuals that are telework ready are required to have telework agreements in place, and the majority of those individuals were already teleworking at least 2 to 3 days per week. And so therefore, the transition for those individuals was a lot cleaner than the transition for individuals, of course, that were not used to teleworking and or had to switch positions because they were in location dependent positions and were unable to report on site to perform their duties. Therefore, we had to quickly pivot and provide them with duties and functions that they could in fact perform at home. So what we did is that we quickly pulled together webinars for our supervisors and managers that not only focused on how to manage a telework ready workforce, even though some of them were already managing a telework ready workforce, but this was a new time because this was an additional stressor. So we pulled together webinars that we held weekly in order to walk supervisors and managers through the resources and tools that they had available in order to train this workforce. We also focused on the other HR flexibilities that were delegated to the federal agencies by OPM. And that had to do with, of course, allowing employees who were telework ready and or who were teleworking, allowing employees also to have the opportunity to break their day up for childcare or dependent care. As many of us know, if you are a telework employee, you are not allowed to also provide dependent care, whether it's for a spouse, a family member, or a child. So that flexibility was in fact delegated and allowed by OPM. And so we wanted to ensure that employees knew that and that managers knew how to also implement that particular flexibility within their workforce. So we walked managers through not only that flexibility, but we also talked about weather and safety leave and how to manage your workforce for individuals that require weather and safety leave, maxi flex schedules. And so there was a full complement of flexibilities that we wanted to ensure managers were aware of. And so those were the focus of the webinars, very scenario based. And again, we held those weekly. For individuals that were in location dependent and or public facing positions, again, the telework was not an option. And so for those managers, we focused on flexibilities that could be implemented for that particular workforce. And that was discussion about shift work, ensuring that employees had access to employee assistance programs, ensuring employees had access to certain resources that if they needed childcare, because a lot of the daycares were closed, but some were open for individuals that were in public facing positions, ensuring that they had those types of resources. And so we really focused on, it really was employee first, and then ensuring that at the same time we could still focus on the mission.
That's great. And you've all kind of highlighted use cases or things that you've put out. And it's great to hear that it sounds like it's a little bit of new products, but it's also coming from maybe existing contracts that exist and have helped you guys make it happen quickly. Something I'm curious about, from what you've seen, what has made a good manager during this global crisis? Is it different than what we see in normal times? And were there any muscles that you guys flexed or managerial skills that were particularly helpful through all this?
I would say,
go ahead.
no, I would. Go ahead, ma'am, please.
Oh, thank you. So, I've said this a lot over the course of my career in this business, so that, being a good manager, whether you are on site or off site, it's not so different. A good manager is a good manager, right? And there are qualities that are inherent in good management and, of course, leadership. Honesty, excellent communication skills, decisiveness is another one, confidence, responsibility, and in this environment, of course, empathy, focus, and we always need a little bit of creativity.
That's great. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Oh, sure. And I think this kind of relates to one of the questions as well, is the perspective of managers. So I agree with some of the skills mentioned. For us here, we really focus on our managers creating that safe and supportive environment for their team members. And how we really start, and we've been in a remote environment, for our entire existence. So we actively communicate through one-on-ones. And that also, provides an additional sort of connection point with the manager and the employee. And we are very, very religious about doing those. This support also can come through just resource and benefit sharing. I think there was a mention of, offering administrative leave during COVID and some other benefits that came up from OPM. I think sharing out those resources so folks feel supported. The support can also come through as managers, us modeling self-care. So us taking time off is really, really important. So, deciding and letting folks know I'm going to take the weekend and I'm going to take a couple extra days so I can recharge. And I think that's really important. And also understanding that folks may feel really disconnected from the content of their work right now and what is going on in the world. And I think that it's really important to have the empathy and understanding that everyone is experiencing things differently. And I don't think the management style should differ from when in a crisis situation, but I think we should be actively communicating in the open with our teams and doing that regularly.
That's great. And it's good to see the prioritization of mental health in this as well. Nicole, is there anything you wanted to add?
The only thing that I would add, and I agree, of course, with my fellow panel members, I would say it's also important to be very flexible with respect to how you are going to manage. I agree. If you are a good leader, you are a good leader, whether you see your workforce every day or whether you are used to managing 100% remote workforce, or you have a combination like myself. And I believe that your skills should transfer and you should be able to manage that workforce. The fact that we're now in a pandemic and a crisis, and especially other events that have occurred recently, I think that managers have to be flexible and empathetic with their staff members. I think that you have to understand that there are people who are going to thrive during this time, but there are also people that are not thriving and that are really struggling. And so you have to be able to quickly pivot between those employees, but also be able to sort of manage overall, but then also treat your employees as individuals. And I agree. I do believe that now more than ever, focusing on employees' mental and physical health is very important. And so one of the things that I've done is I hold a lot more all hands meetings than I used to. We used to have them once every quarter because, of course, we would see each other every day. I'm now holding them pretty much every other week. And it is really to ensure that the team sees me, that we're connected. I try to make it as interactive as possible. I will also send out messages to say the sun's out, it's 11 o'clock. Get up from your laptop, go outside, go for a run, go do yoga on the deck, do whatever it is. But I want everybody to get up. And I think that, and then also checking on people as well. I think it's important because this is a difficult time right now. And so again, it's about, and they're looking to you. And so when I tell people, get up and go outside, I plan to do the same thing. Or I'll tell them, hey, I went for a run this morning. You should go out and get out and do it as well.
That's great. And
what I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah.
What I was going to say is what I'm hearing from my colleagues, and I hear from my colleagues throughout the federal government, private sector organizations as well, is that the health and the safety and the well-being of each employee is a top priority. Our agency provides various online engagement activities, and these are designed to continue to build that camaraderie and that our USPTO community. Again, from weekly themed, bring your own mug chats to book club discussions. There's a diversity film festival, recipe sharing, and other virtual activities that are available to our USPTO employees. Something as simple as a virtual coffee, just quick jumping on a WebEx with your team. Mm-hmm. And let's get together for 10 minutes and just, talk about your family, talk about your dog. How are things going? We also have a telework resource site. It's completely devoted to everything about remote work at the agency that people can go on. There are articles, there are white papers, additional research, training, everything, again, telework centric, that's helpful to them. And we provide telework tips, on a weekly basis, best practices for teleworking, best practices for managing, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all right there and available to our employees.
That's great. And it's really great to hear that across the agencies, you guys are implementing new stress prevention and mental health focused efforts. I think, like you said, it's important now more than ever. I have so many more questions, but time flies clearly when you're having fun and talking about important stuff. And we actually have some audience questions that I think transfer really well into this. So one of them is, as a manager, how have you or in your position, how have you responded to managers who had a really negative perspective on teleworking? In some ways, it can create a harder pressure on staff to perform because they are home. So have you dealt with that? And is there any sort of insights that you can share? Nicole, it looks like you're nodding. Why don't we start with you?
So yes, I think that, you've always had a certain contingent of managers and supervisors that were never on board with telework. And so the fact that the pandemic occurred you would have thought it would have changed, perhaps. It did not necessarily change their minds with respect to, no, I need to see my employees every day. And so the discussions that I would have is, what we had mentioned earlier, a manager is a manager is a manager. At this point, and in some cases, the very hard conversation is you do not have a choice. The telework for employees that have telework ready work is required and mandatory. And so therefore, you need to implement what executive leadership has already stated is going to be the way forward for this department for the foreseeable future. And so you never want to get to that point, because I really would like to walk managers through, well, here are the resources, I'm available, here's how you can manage during this time. Your employees, it's an additional stressor on your employees if they feel as though they're having to fight against you in order just to take advantage of the telework opportunity that everyone else in the agency and or federal government is taking advantage of. And so those it depended on the individual. It really was whether I had to state that this was mandatory. And so it's mandatory, you need to do it, and we'll walk you through it. Or those that were on the fence, okay, let me guide you through this.
Yeah. And it sounds like the trainings and webinars and things that you guys put out that were specifically focused on that kind of give managers no choice but to open their arms and accept it. They have these resources that they need to get it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's great. What are the things, I'm curious to hear from you guys, that you learned or that you're seeing now that you really maybe didn't see before the pandemic, but you'd love to see carry on beyond the pandemic and beyond the national crisis?
I know here at H&F, we started instituting some additional questions to our project health matrix. So every 2 weeks, our folks who are on projects submit health assessments that look at, are we aligned with our partners? How is our team health? How is our stakeholder engagement and things of that nature? We specifically added questions more for like how folks are doing due to the pandemic and our national crisis. And so we started like assessing the actual health of the person as well as the health of the team outside of like the work. And I think I'd love to see that continue beyond this, because it's been really helpful and insightful to see how folks are being impacted by the various events that are happening in their communities.
That's great. And Danette, we had a question come in specifically for USPTO. An audience member was wondering, what is the hardest part of transitioning to 100% telework? So I'd love to hear that. And in explaining that, tell us the things that you'd like to see carry on beyond.
Well, one of the things I want to make clear, again, telework is a voluntary initiative still. And there is a population when we deployed to full-time mandatory telework, a population of about 1,600 individuals who did not have telework agreements in place. Now, that could have been for several reasons, right? I mean, perhaps they weren't eligible in the position. Perhaps they did not have the ISP necessary. We have a requirement that everyone must have cable or Fios. Some people may not have had that in their home. And then there are individuals that like to keep work and home separate. And that's great. I mean, as I said earlier, telework is a voluntary initiative. But in this environment, we needed to have them prepared so that they could continue to work. Again, about 1,600 of those individuals. And it was critical that we made sure that we had the proper training for these folks, that when they got home, they didn't feel completely alone. Mm-hmm. And you know, one thing, and we have been talking a little bit about isolation and making sure that we're inclusive, and we don't forget about those that we can't see every single day. There are individuals who live by themselves in, say, a studio apartment. Maybe their family is far, far away. They don't see them, of course, in this environment. They're not going to see them up close and personally, probably anyway, right? Excuse me. That can be very isolating. And, I think a really good empathetic manager will take a little bit of extra time and effort to reach out to that pocket of individuals to make sure that, yes, they do still feel included. I don't know if that completely answers the question, but I think the probably the main thing is ensuring that people who are launched to telework, who have never teleworked before, have appropriate tools in place and support systems so that they can continue to be effective in their position.
That's great. And again, I just want to reiterate it. It's really great to hear that your minds are in a place of keeping your workforce from not feeling isolated, prioritizing mental health and stress prevention. So thank you for sharing. Like I said, time flies. We are already out of it. So this concludes our session for today's summit. Again, Sarah, Danette, Nicole, all the insights you shared were really helpful to me as well. And I appreciate your time. For the audience, our next session is Accelerating Government's Remote Productivity. It will begin at 9:45. And will include Marlon McFate, Robert Schumann, and Scott Deviney from Riverbed Technology. They're going to discuss the role that network optimization and visibility will play in enabling the next normal for a productive workforce. During the break, we encourage you all to visit our exhibit hall or the chat room, and we'll see you back at 9:45. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.